the chaplain, the spiritual leader, we must always be prepared to lead, to exhort, to encourage, and lead by example. A few years ago, we were going on vacation, and a number of years ago, I bought a motorhome because I wanted to, it wasn't a good investment monetarily because the thing was in the shop all the time, but it was a great investment for the family, for us to get away and have time together. You know, we just always so busy, but I figured if we had an RV, we'd go camping and do things. And sure enough, you know, putting 7 people in an RV for a week is intense fellowship. And I was invited to go and speak on a July 4th weekend up in one of our favorite places up in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. We're going to speak up there at a Ken Ham conference. And I told my wife, I said, well, you know what? We ought to just take the motorhome up, and I'll speak, and we'll take a few days and have a little vacation. So, that sounds like a great idea. Well, now I would describe myself as conservative. My wife calls me cheap. But what we would generally do when we're traveling, you know, you can stay in Walmart parking lots free. You know, if you got a motorhome, you just pull in the parking lot, it doesn't cost you anything. So we had stopped the first night in a Walmart parking lot outside of a place called Cleveland, Tennessee. Ever been to Cleveland, Tennessee? All right. Well, we were second morning heading out, going through Cleveland, Tennessee, and somehow got rerouted right down the middle of town. And my oldest daughter was actually in the front seat, and we were discussing, you know, things that families generally discuss when they're on vacation about how the politicians are destroying the country and that sort of thing. And at just about that moment, my wife lunges to the front of the RV to get my attention. And she couldn't really get the words out. She was pointing, and what she was pointing to was the underpass, the overpass that I was about to go under that said 10 feet, 11 inches. And the RV was about 12 feet. Well, it was too late. And I was under it, and I didn't know what to do, so I just floored it. Well, I didn't want to get stuck. I mean, we made it through, most of us. I mean, there was a bunch of screeching and scratching and dust and stuff flying all over, and, you know, and it was one of those points where you didn't know to scream or to cry. And so we get on the other side, and the traffic was everywhere. My wife said, well, find a place to pull off, and I'll get out to see how bad it is. Well, I knew how bad it was. I could see daylight. So I find a place, we pull off, and, you know, so she gets out 30 seconds back in, she goes, it's bad. And I'm thinking, you know, what are we going to do? This is where we're going to be staying. And you know, it was just, you don't really plan that for a vacation. And I plan everything out, but I don't plan on taking the roof of the RV off and where are you going to take it to get it fixed. So we're trying to figure it out. She's on the phone with the insurance company trying to find a place to take it. And all of a sudden it begins to rain. I mean, literally pouring down rain. And my youngest son, who's with me, who was about 5 years old at the time, grabbing a pan, going around trying to catch the rain coming in. And, you know, it was just crazy. So we find a place back in Chattanooga, and we begin making the ride back to Chattanooga to drop it off. And I'm, you know, processing all this, and I'm thinking, you know, this was really dumb. So I told my wife, I said, now, when we get back there, you go in and tell them what happened. I mean, they might have recognized me. I didn't want them to recognize me. So we pull in, and she goes in and talks to him, and the guy comes like, oh, that happens about 12 times a year. We see that all the time. So I didn't feel so bad at that point. But my parents were going to meet us there, so we rerouted them to come over, and we had to get a U-Haul trailer and put all of our stuff in a U-Haul, and I had to get my assistant to find a room in Pigeon Forge. Now, let me just, I don't know if you ever tried this, but if you haven't, don't. To try to find a room at the last minute on July 4th weekend in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. There's nothing there. The only thing we found was it was like a pet hotel. I mean, dogs in every room barking. It was horrible. We spent the night there, and the next morning, it was Saturday night, next morning, Sunday, I get up, and I had actually been serving as interim pastor at a church in addition to FRC, and so this is the first time we'd had a weekend off, and I was like, have you ever been where you're just arguing with God? God, why did this happen? Of course, he said, if you wouldn't have been so dumb to drive under an overpass, it wouldn't have happened. But I'm thinking, wrestling with God, arguing with God, I'm out taking a run and trying to work off some frustration. I went back and I told my wife, I said, we're going home. We're just going home. Ken can find somebody else to speak. It's not that important. We're going home. How can you enjoy a vacation when you're trying to figure out which kid's not going to college who can repair your RV? And she goes, well, let's just go down and see your parents for a minute. They were staying down the road at a condo that didn't have dogs. And so I said, okay, well, we'll drive down there. So we get onto the main road, and we're going down, and forewarn you, there's another bridge in this story. All of a sudden, I see lights and police coming on both sides of me. And I'm thinking, what in the world at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning in Pigeon Forge could possibly happen that would have police responding? And so I pull off onto this bridge, and I find myself in a roadblock. Both ends of the bridge are blocked by police officers, and I'm thinking, what is going on? We're the only car on the bridge. And then I look to see a woman on the side of the bridge about to jump. And the police officers in uniform, as they got closer to her, she got further out on the bridge, ready to jump. And I immediately told my wife, I said, you take the car, I'm going to go see if I can help. And I went and I identified myself, and I told them I was a chaplain, I could help. And so they said, please help. Long story short, took me about 45 minutes to talk the woman down off the bridge, to have her sit down on the curb with me, and I heard her story. A story that we hear all too often. Broken marriage, failed relationship, children estranged from their mother, drugs, the whole thing. Really what's happening in America everywhere. But I prayed with her, and she said, I'll go to the hospital if you'll go with me. So I got in the back of the police car. First time I've been in the back of the police car. But I got in, and I rode with her to the hospital, went in, and they ended up admitting her, and the police took me back to the condo where my family was. And I'll never forget walking into the room. My wife opened the door and greeted me, didn't say a word, but I knew exactly what she was saying. Aren't you glad we didn't go home? There's so many distractions, so many things that are happening, but God is planning out our steps. And as the spiritual leader of our home, you see, you and I, if we will be the spiritual leaders that God has called us to be, who's not to say that it is the men of this nation that will call this nation back off the edge? That by you and I being prepared to be the spiritual leaders and to step in at that critical moment and to provide the leadership that is needed in this nation today, that we may be the key. Men, I believe it's true, or I wouldn't be here today. We have the ability to change the course of this nation.